Welcome to TSG Talk. TSG Talk aims to contribute positively towards the care of an injured casualty or vulnerable patient. If your goal is to maximise your input for the people you care for, then TSG Talk is for you. Our podcast will interview colleagues who are at the cutting edge of their professions. Often they're involved in creating solutions for areas that historically have proven difficult, or have a wealth of experience in a particular complex response. Each podcast will provide unique, engaging content. At TSG Associates, we will always strive to ensure our solutions are ahead of the curve and positively impact on the quest for prioritising survival and minimising suffering. We believe TSG Talk will complement our vision and provide a platform to enhance your response. It is my pleasure to now pass you across to our host, Senior Partner at TSG, Colin Smart.
Welcome everybody to the latest edition of the podcast TSG Talk. Tonight is a really fascinating subject. We're going to look at why the society that our patients live in can influence the care that we give. And to do that tonight, we're honoured to talk with David Bates, who is a lecturer at Cumbria University and comes with a wealth of experience of giving care throughout the world, both on military and civilian deployments, and he's going to talk us through his experiences and his research on why understanding the society that our patients come from is so important to the care. So I hope everybody enjoys it tonight. If you do enjoy it, please give us a like and subscribe, and we always do really appreciate the 5-star ratings. It just really helps this podcast gets more visibility to the wider community to pass this information on. So thank you everybody. I hope you enjoy the podcast, and we'll talk again soon. Hi, good afternoon, David. It's wonderful to see you. How are you today?
Hello, Colin. Yeah, great, thanks.
Great. David, before we actually go into the subject tonight, which I'm really looking forward to discussing with you, could you just tell me a little bit about your background and maybe just explain a little bit more about how you started to get really interested into why the society our patients come from can be so important for the care?
Yeah, so I spent 42 years in the Army Medical Services specifically, starting out as a trauma nurse in burns and plastic surgery, and then throughout my career just sort of drifted, as I think most people do, into public health. So once you get into command and staff and you leave clinical, you become more primary care and public health orientated. Because that's the nature of the job, I suppose. And I left the regular army in 2016 and joined the University of Cumbria as a lecturer and helped develop disaster response humanitarian action programs and modules. And that's really where I think the philosophy of social reality, total place, community, the importance of community, context, but probably even more important, moral responsibility started to coalesce and influenced. Because I think a lot of us, we don't realise these concepts probably until it's too late in life. If we had all this when we were 18-year-olds, we'd be much better operators and people, but it takes a lifetime to learn. And that sort of started coming together when I was helping to develop these programs and modules. And at the moment, I'm helping to develop a Master's in Public Health for the university, which again has adopted this philosophy. So the community, population and place being key, starting there as your foundation and then working outwards, rather than what we do see a lot in industry, commerce, government, leadership. You do see a lot of transactional practice where we're focused on the organisation and the kit and probably a bit of training, but people don't seem to be the centre of all of that. So that's really how it developed over the years.
Okay.
So,
It's a fascinating history. And I know when we chatted before this podcast and you were talking through some of your experiences worldwide and the travels you've had
Mm.
working in different societies throughout the world. Can you just expand a little bit on some of your travels and what you've seen? Because I certainly know when we were talking before this, I was fascinated to learn some of, the actual being on the ground experience that you had.
Mm. Yeah. So my first real experience of being in an austere, not, I mean, it was austere, but it was a permissive environment. Was Belize.
Mhm.
That was 1985 for a short tour, and everything was already set up there. So the system was there. We just walked in and took over from the previous team. I was part of the field surgical team, basically the resuscitation officer or resuscitation nurse for that team. But what that did was it was a good introduction. It was a good place to cut your teeth because the system was up and running. We were working with the Ministry of Health. The Ministry of Health told us what the requirements were. And we would just go out to the villages and take our field kit with us and do what was required, running clinics and doing minor surgery, minor treatments, and that sort of thing. It was very much fire and forget. So we wouldn't do anything that needed extensive aftercare. It will be simple, like you do day cases here in the UK or in other high income countries. But the benefits to the population, because it was what the population needed, were amplified, and we were probably using this this community and population based philosophy, but as a Lance corporal staff nurse, newly qualified, I didn't really appreciate that back
Mhm.
then, but
Mhm.
that sort of stuck.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. No, that's interesting. Any other? You started in Belize. Any other
Mm.
travels that you've done where you've seen this happen?
Yeah, so Malawi was probably the next one. That was
Mhm.
91, 92. So that was straight after the first Gulf War. And that was different because I was actually in command then. So I took a short-term training team, or two short-term training teams out to Malawi. And what we were doing there was more akin to what you do, and that was training Malawi Army medics up to the old RMA, so the old Regimental
Mhm.
Medical Assistant standard,
Mhm.
so that they were equipped to, and these were regimental. These weren't, they weren't medical services.
Mhm.
These were regimental soldiers, so
Mhm.
signalers, REME, infantry, paras.
Mhm.
Many of them, it was their first exposure to health and care and basic life support. So very much a blank sheet,
Mhm.
which was good. But again, going back to that experience in Belize, that because we were given a mission, we were told by MOD, you've got to
Mhm.
go out there, you've got to train these guys, and it's been agreed that you use the RMA syllabus.
Mhm.
But when we got there, obviously we had to assess the situation, understand the community, understand
Mhm.
the operations that they were mounting
Mhm.
in the middle of Mozambique on
Mhm.
a long railway line, and being exposed to insurgency. So we had to understand that without actually going into the operational area. So we were,
Mhm.
for our firm base was Malawi.
Mhm.
We stayed there, but the troops were going in out
Mhm.
of Mozambique down to Nacala on
Mhm.
the Indian Ocean. So that's where the supplies were coming up from
Mhm.
through, and that's obviously why Renamo was destroying the trains when they
Mhm.
could.
Mhm.
So we were giving them that exposure to basic life support, with a bit of prolonged field care as well. And
Mhm.
again, this is before prolonged field care, I think, actually became
Mhm.
an SOP or a TTP,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
suppose. But it was a requirement, and actually, having said that, there were some enlightened senior officers in the Army Medical Services, commanding officers of field ambulances prior to this, who recognised that standards of care needed to be improved forward. And they were the ones that got nursing officers pulled into field ambulances to improve the standards of care and health and care in those units. So we sort of took that with us as well. So we took the mission that we'd been given. We took our understanding, and also that recent experience from the Gulf probably helped as well, and also Northern Ireland and training in Germany. But and then identified their key requirements. So, senior medical officer. There was only one senior medical officer in the whole of the Malawi Defence Force, but they had some brilliant clinical officers. So these are trained nurses, but they do a 4-year degree course. But they're trained the way we were as regimental medical officer assistants. So they could do minor surgery, they could do resus and that sort of thing. So they were really our intelligence officers, and they were the ones that really set those requirements for us, so that we weren't going off piste and doing what we enjoyed, and then the guys weren't getting the correct correct tuition and training.
Yeah, so it's interesting what you say there, that a lot of the planning and the intelligence you got from that deployment was driven by the local people. What
Very much so.
we often find in some deployments is that we can go across as a first world nation and almost try and take en bloc first world medicine. And there are certainly some cases that we've come across in literature where that almost sits in a silo.
Yeah.
But it's almost like putting a square peg into a round hole, trying to apply that first world medicine into the society that you're trying to apply it to. So it's very interesting there that you picked up that it was actually the local knowledge and the local clinicians and possibly people from the local population that was driving a lot of your procedures and how and actually how you operated. That's interesting.
You do have to be careful though, because they can steer you off course. And recently I was in the Sudans recently before last Christmas, and that really is some areas up there really are blank sheets of paper. But they look at what's outside, so they'll look at what's in countries around surrounding them, like Kenya and Ethiopia and what have you, and Uganda, and they'll say, well, we want some of that. So when you're trying to do a health needs assessment or an integrated needs assessment with them, the first thing they ask for is doctors and hospitals. And actually, you've got, and this is where you can build that community, build the community context, the environment, the human and the animal health pieces, build them up from the ground, a ground up approach, rather than say we're going to have a big referral hospital, but then there's no public health going on. There's no primary care. Everybody goes to the hospital.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you say there. Going back to many years ago when I was studying my degree in disasters, there was an author that we were always pointed towards called Smiley. And one of his greatest quotes, if I remember it, was what you shouldn't be doing is building a cathedral in the sand. And that analogy you used, where often sometimes at government levels or at regional government level, they want a status symbol. And as you rightly said, that could be the hospital, that could be something that is visibly big. But the problem is there are no foundations around that thing. So it looks good, but come the first epidemic, come the first multiple casualty incident, come the first, not even epidemic, but just a surge of, say, malaria. There is nothing to support that infrastructure because, as he would point out, it's a cathedral in the sand. It looks great, but no infrastructure. And I think this maybe And I think why I'm so fascinated with this conversation is I think when we start to understand society, we understand that it's not, they may have a part to play in it, these large infrastructure projects, but actually it's the fabric of the society. When we understand
Yeah,
that, that's
yeah,
where we put almost the unglamorous processes in place to
yeah,
improve care.
yeah,
So it's really interesting you pointed that out, and there's
yeah,
not many quotes I remember from my undergraduate days, but that is one that does stick in my mind.
yeah,
The cathedral in the sand, and I think
yeah,
it epitomizes what we're trying to almost not do,
mm,
to provide care.
yeah,
There was a couple of points when you were doing your introduction I picked up on as well, which I thought were
yeah,
really good. One was the moral responsibility of
mm,
medicine. You know, I think if we're trying to provide optimum care, then I think that's a really good way to phrase it, that there is a moral responsibility to care
yeah,
for that community
yeah,
within the parameters that they operate, and making sure that it isn't transactional. So we're not the great
yeah,
first world gods coming in, applying what we
mm,
think care, but then leaving,
yeah,
and leaving almost a vacuum. We've provided the care, but there's no support mechanisms,
yeah,
which again, I think delves into a bit more of how society functions in different places. So I thought those were two really important points if people were to consider
mm,
when they're deploying and what they're trying to do. Is there a moral aspect to it? And are we providing care beyond the transactional level?
yeah,
I think
yeah,
there'd be two very good questions to ask yourself when you're
mm,
heading out to not even different
sure,
places, different domestic settings as well, with
yeah,
different social cultural
yeah,
settings
yeah.
as well.
Yeah,
It's
we
abs-
saw that during COVID. That you everybody in the NHS, you assume, are well motivated, and they've got a well developed sense of moral responsibility, which is the reason why they get up in the morning, put their uniform on,
Mhm,
and go and do something which the majority of the population is not going to do, because it's pretty nasty
mhm,
sometimes. So that's that's applicable in day to day health and care, as well as, well, it's day to day health and care if you're living in the middle
mhm,
of Sudan.
mhm,
But if we're visiting, and
mhm,
we're going out to lend our support, our experience, then you've and that really goes. Yeah, I suppose what I'm talking about is what motivates you to do that as well,
mhm,
and having the right reasons, and we often talk about whether we deploy on these missions to salve our own conscience, or
mhm.
to
Yeah.
make ourselves
Mhm,
feel good. And I've had that sort of internal debate, and
mhm,
also, you know what draws you back to these austere and sometimes less than permissive
mhm,
environments.
mhm,
And you start asking yourself, are you a war junkie, or
mhm,
you know uh, but it's that depth of reflection, I think, that we need to be transformative, and
mhm,
not just to be transactionalists.
mhm,
We've got a system, we've got a job, so we've got a task, or a requirement to meet.
mhm,
There's got to be something deeper than
mhm,
that, because that's you can get a technician to do that. We can train technicians to do that,
mhm,
but again, it's that word intelligence.
mhm,
It's having intelligence in the system that is able to solve wicked problems, or formulate recommendations, courses of action, when the SOP don't work.
mhm, mhm.
I think
Interesting.
that's the difference.
Yeah. And it was quite interesting, with a lot of the exhibits that we do, and sometimes when we're lecturing on areas that we're very specific to within TSG, but we talk to a lot of young motivated people who are at the early stages of the medical career, be that doctors, nurses,
Yeah.
technicians, surgical assistants, the whole, and we often say to them, what is you looking, the people who are interested in maybe working more remote, and then there's maybe possibly a sort of semi-permissive area, and we often ask them, why do you want to do it?
Mm,
And you definitely get two groups.
yeah.
There's one group that always answers because I want to advance my skills, I want to
Yeah.
get this
Yeah.
experience, and it's a very I want to.
Mm.
And there's the other group, and they're probably a little bit older, that says, I want to take my skills and see if I can enhance what's going on.
Mm.
And it is, you can almost put it into two groups. And
Yeah.
it's quite interesting when I'm talking to the first group, and by no means they're trying to get it wrong. But I often say to them a sort of counter question, and a progressive question to say, well, what do you think you can do with your skill in the community you go into? And you can almost see them going, oh, it's not about my CV. It's about, as you say,
Yeah.
it's not transactional, it's transformative.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lovely phrase to talk about where, and it's interesting as soon as you pose that question to them, because they're all trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Nobody's going out there on a pure, this is all about me. There's the thought process behind it. It's just how they communicate it. And
Yeah.
it's interesting. You can see them thinking, actually, yeah, I get that.
Mm.
So it's an interesting area to bring out.
Yeah.
Enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's where One Health really can really accelerate that thinking as well, because we're thinking about the environment, the climate first. We're thinking about the animals, including the humans that are in it, and everybody's interlinked. And we need to do a lot more, I think, integrated with our veterinary colleagues and dentists and mental health as well. The way I see most health systems at the moment is they're fragmented. They're very fragmented, and they're getting more fragmented. So as resources become even less, we're seeing cuts, not only in aid but also in our own services. Rather than grouping together, we tend to split. And when you're trying to create a center of mass, a center of gravity, it's anathema. And you think, well, why are we not grouping our resources and our assets? Why are we not collaborating? We're just tolerating one another in the mission space. And this again is where we can develop those centers of excellence in places like northern Nigeria, Sudan, even Syria now. Now that we hope things are starting to settle down over there, South Caucasus again. There's been rumblings, insurgencies, civil wars, Russian intervention down there. And a really good example of that was we have a partner in Armenia who was running a tertiary care centre, rehab centre in Nagorno-Karabakh, Stepanakert, until that was overrun by the Azerbaijanis a couple of years ago, getting on for 2 years ago now. And so the centre had to evacuate. So the building's still there, unless the Azerbaijanis have destroyed it now, but the building was still there, but I had to get the people, the patients, the vehicles as much out as possible. And they moved up to Yerevan in Armenia, and they're just in the process now of planning their new centre. But the interim, they're doing a lot more care in the community. They're doing a lot more outreach. And that was the model that I was trying to veer them towards, rather than buying a brand new centre and cooperating and collaborating with the government. But of course, politics and friction, the old von Clausewitz cries. They've always got a vote in the plan, and so they're still trying to remain as independent as possible. But hopefully there'll be a little bit more cooperation and cohesion between the government and it's a charity really in the independent sector. So we'll watch that. But what they've been doing is they've maintained that centre of excellence, but in the community. So it's dissipated. It's peripatetic now. And they could carry on doing that. but yeah, then you'd have to hire hydrotherapy and stuff like that. So there are pros and cons, for going back to having your own infrastructure and your independence. But it's interesting.
It almost sounds like the it's difficult to summarize it up because it's a complex area, but they almost want some sort of a hybrid model. They don't want to give up the work in the community, but there are also some advantages to having the structure and the centralized response as well. And how do you then balance almost the draw to go back into the facility, because maybe that's what you've always done, and that's a little bit of a magnet, but actually the great unseen work is creating the healthcare and the fabric of society.
And that's what's important. So we talk about measures of effect, or monitoring, evaluation, accountability, learning, and now research as well. And it's focusing on the outcomes and the impact rather than the outputs as well. So that's another element of transformative leadership and transformative organization, is focusing on the strategic, the impact, the outcomes, rather than the outputs, which are very tactical, and they're part of the plan, business plan, KPIs, and all of that stuff. But what's important to society is the end state. It's, what are you achieving with this? So, if you're giving somebody who's lost both their legs, above knee amputees, really good prosthetics, so that they have a high level of independence into later life, which is now happening because prosthetics have got so good. Even 10, 20 years ago, we were expecting bilateral amputees, triple amputees, to not remain fit and to end up in wheelchairs by the time they get into their 50s or the 60s. That's not happening now. They're staying fit. They're they're becoming athletes, and so there has been a change. So that's an outcome, which obviously outcomes, you can't measure them in days and weeks and months, can you? They take years, but we're just seeing that coming through now.
Isn't that interesting? Because if you looked at I'm just going to pull out one model where maybe somebody had a landmine injury in a third world country. You saved their life, but you then put them back into their village environment, which was 95% agriculture subsistence farming. And the family goes, man with above below knee amputation, this person can't tend the fields. We don't have the capacity to deal with them. But now medicine can take that same person and give them prosthetics that they can still be contributing to. I mean, we're not just saying the social economic part of that family, we're talking to this, in some of the levels we're talking about survivability of that social group. So isn't it interesting how this is such a fluid subject, where once before we said how it could almost be impossible to integrate that person back into their social structure, given the dynamics that they have to function with, because of just the fabric of how they have to function and survive at that level. But now we can do this. We can take the same injury and put somebody in who is productive. So it's definitely I mean, this is the lovely bit about this. It's a very fluid level. And I suppose one of the things is to consider is, what are the advancements that allow us to take what was a pre-existing or an injury, which would be a deficit to a social group, and now take that same injury, apply a level of care that would be sustainable for that social group. Wow, there's a paper there.
There is. It's not new either, because we saw this when we were in Malawi, 91, 92. There are a lot of refugees from Mozambique on the Malawi side of the border. In fact, it was estimated, I think the highest level was probably over 1 million Mozambicans that were being looked after on the Malawi side. And talking about prosthetics, Malawi against polio changed their part of their one or two of their objects. So because they were focusing, they made calipers for children with polio because it was endemic in the country, and the vaccination programs were, with the war in Mozambique and people spilling over into Malawi, vaccination programs were that they were there, but they weren't covering. They didn't have the coverage that they needed.
Mm-hmm.
So Malawi against polio were making these prosthetics, but once the war injured were coming in, and the local farmers that were stepping on mines in Teta province coming over the border, they were started making prosthetics for the amputees. Mm-hmm. So switching from their polio remit to providing a tertiary care service for these war wounded, much the same as what we were doing in Armenia, mm-hmm. or in Nagorno-Karabakh. So it's interesting, even that, because their workshops were very primitive, and they were using scrap bicycle wheels and things like that. Anything mm-hmm. that they could get their hands on, and they'd turn it into a reasonable prosthetic limb, and also building wheelchairs as well for those that couldn't tolerate a prosthesis. Or mm-hmm. So again, it makes me think about always thinking about the wider determinants of health, and it's not only the obvious health and care elements. It's all that. It's the community. It's housing. It's mm-hmm. hygiene. It's governance. It's law. Mm-hmm. Having the legal system to support you, economics, employment, education, mm-hmm. And in a project like that, you've got all these elements coming in together, and you can employ people as well. A lot of the injured were employed. They were trained to be artisans. They were trained to either run the workshop or do or make the limbs. So, but now they're getting more sophisticated prostheses coming in from South Africa and places like that. So, but it was just fascinating seeing that back then, 1991, and.
Yeah, you know what, you bring out such an important point, and I this is an area I would point out to any person that's wanting to take medicine into maybe a more remote area, or even an area that's had a level of destruction involved, whether it's natural or man-made, is that you'd be interesting to get your thoughts on it. But you often look at the news and you see that the sort of post-disaster, post-conflict, it's portrayed as a vulnerable community. But actually, as you've pointed out really well there, these local communities are highly evolved and resilient communities, and they know how to adapt, and they know how to take almost minimal resources and max it out, because by the nature of how they function, they are highly resilient and they're tough. And I think if we go in with that mindset that we're not just taking care of a vulnerable community and they've got no ability to respond. If we understand they're highly resilient, and the other point I picked up there is that whatever level of care that I think we can take, then we have to bring them into the system as well. What skill has that community got to manufacture what we need? What level of care have they got to help their, because they know more than us about how their communities function. And I think it goes back to, again, not working as we take care to a different society, not working in that silo, integrating the society, but understanding resilience. And resilience, in the limited experience I have, is really high. That would you agree with that? Is that fair?
Yeah, and that's through learning, because they've had previous experience a lot of the time. They've experienced famines, they've experienced locust raids, they've experienced war. Civil war and interstate war. So they do build. They do build on that. They do learn. They do reflect.
So I suppose part of your research, if you're deploying a part of your health risk assessment, is to almost say what have been the events that have happened previously, and how has that society responded. So if I go there, am I being complementary to the response they've already got? I suppose that's, again, if you're talking to the person deploying and trying to point them in the right direction, maybe that's something they want to look at. Because that's just saying, we may be going out there with no experience of that environment, but we're going into community who really know that environment, and they already have the experience, and they often knows what works and what doesn't. And all we have to do is ask sometimes. Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, that sort of leads into this area of the three priorities, really, because I was thinking about this after we spoke last time, and I think I said that I feel I'm increasingly learning or believing that advocacy is the biggest. It's probably the most powerful action that you can actually not give or donate, or I suppose you do. I suppose you because what you're doing is you're a voice for the voiceless, and that's what, when you visit a lot of these communities, that's what they say. They say thank you for coming here. You don't have to take anything with you. You don't have to take money, aid or assistance, but because you've actually visited and you're going to take their story back, then that's really positive. And then you get that. I suppose that generates the motivation then, and sort of sparks their sense of moral responsibility, because they want to do something, they do what they can, but now with a little bit of leverage and gearing that we might be able to bring, that will actually help them, and then they'll buy in, or they'll contribute to the plan and to the strategy, because they can see a way out, they can see a way ahead, a bit like the center in Armenia. They could have just said, well, that's it. We've been overrun. We've lost all our patients. We've lost all our staff, vehicles, and our building. We're not going to carry on, but they have.
Yeah, and I suppose that goes back to understanding that the human race is resilient, and the environment within what societies operate in have their own levels of resilience within those societies that sometimes we don't fully understand. But if we do understand it more, I think we can provide better care. I think that's what we're trying.
What we did do there, which was slightly different, but it was actually a requirement at the time, was take anticipatory action as well, which is something which is just sort of coming into the lexicon. I've seen a few papers talking about anticipatory action. So rather than always responding to disasters, which is what we do, sending humanitarian assistance and aid, either in the form of money or food or medical care or whatever, is actually anticipating disasters. So it's a bit like we do in disaster management anyway, with mitigation and preparation. But it's more focused on the humanitarian phase, which is often in the recovery, isn't it? So maybe late response, early recovery, and then recovery. So it's thinking ahead to that, so that we're not scrabbling around having a deck appeal to get millions and millions of pounds to send to Somalia or whatever. But what we're doing is we're actually putting things in place which will mitigate the effects of future hazards and threats. So, and that's what we did there. Really, was we were planning that evacuation a long time before it actually had to happen. So,
and I think what you bring out there is that early warning systems, research, that they're there. But you need to go looking for them.
You do.
Again, it's the old adage: there's no point going to the dance and learning to dance. It's too late, isn't it? Or you'll be a very bad dancer. And somebody will get the toes stood on, and that won't be good. But you're right. if we can use the research that's out there, if we can use the early warning methods that have been developed and can be quite sophisticated now, then that, again, if you're going back to how do we provide optimum care, having that bit of research before you deploy as an individual or as a team, as an organisation, is going to enhance what we do. So I think, like most jobs in life, 8/10 of your success is down to your preparation.
Lawrence of Arabia used to say, you can plan and learn and get 90% of the knowledge and the skills, the experience that you need, but it's that elusive 10th, and that's where the transformative bit comes in. It's that dark space in the Johari window, the fourth corner, and that's what research is all about. Of course, it's about shining a light in there, illuminating it, or us becoming enlightened. And I think that's what we need now. We need a second age of enlightenment, because a lot of what those guys did back in the 1700s, 1800s, a lot of it we've forgotten. It's been overtaken, and we and we lose we're in danger of losing the connection.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And you'll know this from your military experience. One of the great challenges for any military medical organisation is to retain the knowledge from conflict. Because there's numerous examples. Going back to First World War, where we had battlefield blood supplies. We had certain epidemics caused by the soil and everything that was there, with the amount of contamination involved in it.
Gas gangrene.
And it's all, and many of the lessons learned, the application of the tourniquet over many conflicts, which changed. Isn't it interesting? It's how you maintain those lessons learned and apply it to the next place that you're heading out for. I was examining the other day a presentation, and the learner's last slide was the Kazivac plan for the I think it was the third Battle of Ypres, or one of the battles of Ypres anyway. And what he was talking about was what they were talking about was the tension between getting quality care into the hot zone, into less than permissive, austere environment, but also the casualty flow back. And that was his impact, was, we need to remember the lessons of and the model was great, because you could apply it to Manchester, you could apply it to Kensington and Westminster, the Grenfell fire, and I just thought that was so elegant. And that is that remembering, as you said, remembering the lessons that and the lessons from conflict. I mean, it's slightly off subject
to catastrophe.
Slightly off subject from society and providing optimal care. It's interesting to see our lessons from the past. Because if you look at all sort of military planning at the moment for a land war in Europe, they're looking at how do we move 1,000 casualties a day. But the templates for that were actually set up in the First World War, and we're moving back to train transport. We're looking at the wider hubs of how people move. But I suppose bringing this back to the core of this conversation, that many of the lessons learned before have already happened. There's there's not many new things happening. There may be something that's happened before with a slightly different dynamic, but the earthquake has happened, the conflict has happened, the flood has happened, the famine has happened, and people have responded and either had good responses or learned lessons, and most of those things are documented. So getting the research to understand lessons learned and apply them before we go there instead of learning. By the sounds of it, if you're really trying to impact with optimum care in society, it is the research part. And understanding past lessons, past events, and then applying lessons learned would seem to be a major part of the ability to provide really good care.
And integrating all the different branches, and not only human medicine, as we said, but environmental and animal, and again, it's getting understanding those key requirements as well. The Finns, after the Second World War, their medical services were they had no money because they were paying reparations to the Russians, and they had to prioritise their health and care services, and they decided that it was neonatal and maternity that was the most important because they wanted to rebuild the population.
Okay. Right.
So, if you were thinking, what am I going to prioritize?
Right.
Most people, it'd be trauma, or nobody thinks about dentistry anymore, do they? But and maternity services, we're seeing all the problems in our own. But it's those strategic. It's the strategic outcomes and the impact. What are you trying to achieve? I'm trying to achieve a healthy population, a healthy working population. Within the next, we need it within the next 10, 20 years, not 50 years. So.
Yeah, isn't it amazing when we're talking about what society requires for good care and the fulfillment of the society, but there is strategic decisions at national level as we are repopulating as a society.
Yeah.
Therefore, care should focus on that. And then we're almost in at local village level where I can't survive unless you get me another cow, because if I don't have a cow which was killed in the disaster, my family will starve.
Yeah.
And if my family's starving, you're now having to bring a healthcare system in to do famine relief.
Yeah.
So isn't it amazing that the different levels in caring for a society again, I suppose many of us will go out at the local level, but the local level may be driven by what are very strategic national requirements as well, which again, I suppose it's going back to research and understanding of where it is and what's driving it, and is the conflict in those views, which there could be as well.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's important that research has been brought in to MEAL, into monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning, because it is part of that learning, and it's this reflection like we're having now as well.
No, fascinating. Just trying to summarize that conversation a little bit. If you were to talk to somebody who wanted to take their medical skills maybe out into a semi-permissive area, into a different society than what we would traditionally call a first world society, what would be the 3 tips that you would give them? I can probably guess a couple, but I'd be really interested. What would be say, here's 3 things for you to think about before you make that decision?
Yeah, you've obviously got to research the country, but more specifically the region of the country that you're going to, because somewhere like Nigeria it's huge, and it's like the US. It's made up of states which are different countries anyway, so they're all going to have their own different rules and regulations, and so you need to research the country, the community, the politics, everything, all those wider determinants as well, to really get a good feel for what you're letting yourself in for, and not just understanding that it's austere and maybe less permissive, semi-permissive, or non-permissive. You need to make sure that your credentials are recognised. So again, somewhere like Nigeria, it's going to be state recognition. You need to understand that, and also learn a bit, obviously, about the system that you're going into. So they'll have standards. They'll have standards of care. We use the Royal Society of Public Health or the Faculty of Public Health standards here in the UK. That's a good start. But if they've got their own, they may well have adopted UK ones anyway, because a lot of their public health docs and nurses and specialists are members of the FRSPH anyway. It's a international organisation. And the third one would be, I think, try to identify some key personalities before you get there as well. So and also you'd probably be going in from a top down approach as you're deploying, rather than disaster and humanitarian action, we always talk about bottom up, don't we? And the expanding balloon. Well, in this case, you've got to go in from the macro or the strategic and down to the micro and the tactical. And when you're actually in the community, it's understanding who has the power base and who has the knowledge, which is normally the tribal chiefs or the pastors and the pastors' wives. It's a bit like, the old Women's Institute here. You want to get something done, or you want to know something. That's where you that's where your target, and then just continuously building up that picture. There's loads of tools and loads of models out there. The WHO and the UN have human security assessment models, and UN OCHA, they have their own. But again, they're very transactional and systematic, and won't necessarily give you the knowledge and the intelligence that you need to actually survive and be effective on the ground. And survival, safety and security is a priority. Your own safety and security.
You've picked up a really good point there. We talked to a colleague who'd just been deployed in Gaza, and what he brought out was that it's not a safety shield anymore to have a red cross on you. Actually, in many of the areas, you are now the target. So if you go out with the preconception that being an aid worker will give you a level of protection, what his point was that it's actually it's almost turned 180 degrees now, that actually you, in many areas you're deploying, you are now the target. So I think understanding your own vulnerabilities and having a risk assessment on that you're at least comfortable with, that you understand the risk level that you're going on, is actually a huge area.
And this is not new either, because the ICRC and London School of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene they concluded a project in 2016, which was healthcare in danger. And that was articulated back then, and that's the reason why in Syria they weren't using ambulances with red crescents on. They were putting people in the backs of taxis or in the boots of cars to evacuate them, purely because they were targets. And also you become currency as well. Somewhere like northern Nigeria, where there's lots of kidnapping, you're easy prey. And somebody could they'll kidnap you and ask for the ransom, and so it's a quick way, or they think it's a quick way of making money. So you have to be very, very careful.
And I think that goes back again to the core of this conversation, is understanding within the society you go into that it may be that the police do not control the security of where you are. Where we're used to the UK police service having a level of hands-off control, and you approach a police person and there's a level of understanding and safety in that. Whereas in many areas, the society of the police force is almost outside the law, and the ability to kidnap and things like that is what areas of society are doing to actually fund certain things within the society as well. And it's almost accepted that is a given thing to do. I think that comes back in. If you're looking for your safety, you've got to do the research and understand, if you're going to get kidnapped, the cavalry in the local area might not be coming to get you.
No,
because that's not how it works.
And that impacts on the principles of humanitarian action as well. So the 4 principles that we've all grown up with and loved, and again they're coming into question. There's a lot of debate at the moment about how can you be independent in that situation when you're reliant on security from somewhere. You could hire a private security company if you wanted to, but can you afford that? Do you need it? So these are all the questions that you're asking yourself, and before you get on the plane. And this is where organisations do help. So if you're part of a larger NGO like Médecins Sans Frontières or whatever, a consortium, or you've got more of that security. You've got because they've got their processes, they've got all their safeguarding stuff and all of that. But if you're an individual, like the poor chap, the cabbie that went to Syria and was beheaded, you haven't got that. You're on your own. And you can't then go back to the principles. Well, you're not following the principles of humanitarian action because you're a terrorist organization. You can't use that. And and I say at the Red Cross, well, you won't be able to use anyway because you've got to be registered, haven't you? You've got to be a registered organization and declared. So it's very, very interesting and getting a lot more complicated.
Yeah, there's probably a whole podcast on this. Really, it's fascinating. Yeah. Just we have one more question to ask you, but I'm going to try and summarize some of the key points you've brought out because I've just found this conversation fascinating, and I think anybody looking to take medical care out to different areas, whatever they may be, is going to get a lot from this. So let me have a go at trying to summarize, and please let me know if I've got anywhere near it. Okay. So the key points I brought up is, and I think this is such a good phrase, is that we should be looking to take transformative care into the areas that we want to operate and not transactional care. Yes, there is always a level that we will want to apply it and gain personal experience from doing these things. But actually, what is the transformative nature of what I'm going to try to do as an individual, as a team, when I go into that? And I think anybody looking to deploy for the first time or the 21st time, that's always a question. I think it's worth asking yourself or asking the team to understand that. That is really important.
And I also emphasize action as well, because you never know what effect or what capability you need to deliver to have the desired effect. So it could be just advocacy, it could be aid, it could be assistance, it could be surgery, it could be medicine, pediatrics. You'll get an idea when you do your desk level research, but it's not until you actually get on the ground and you're talking to people, like that example I gave you in northern Uganda when I got all the volunteer health workers and we were scrabbling around in a sand pit and trying to work out which questions they need to ask the HIV/AIDS patients when they were struggling to recover despite having the therapy and the support the support medicines. So and they then told us what the requirement was. So we could have just said, well, you need more Septrin or more whatever, but it wasn't that. It was more wider determinants of health like food and drink and
and I think that's one of the next point that's going to come on to, is that the society that you are responding to will probably have most of the answers for you. And they will also be able to tell you what's appropriate for the long. So when you do leave, have you left that transformative care that can continue to exist within that society? They will tell you what works and will not work at an immediate time span and medium and long term. So I think making sure you do not sit as the great white god of first world medicine, is that you completely integrate, you understand them, and you listen to them. About what works and what doesn't, because when you leave, they're still there. So I think that's a really part, and that brings us on to a really one word really, is that there's a lot of morality in what we're doing here. It's understanding what actually difference can I make if I get this right. So we can never get away from the moral responsibility of going somewhere different and trying to do something good. So I think that's a really important point. A big area I picked up is that it's an ever-changing subject. 15, 20 years ago, the double amputee taken back into a subsistence village would be very detrimental to the family's literally survival. Where advances in medicine can now produce something we can put back in with a high quality of life that can actually still contribute to family survival and growth, which is, I think, what we're looking at. So although past research is really important, which I think we pointed out, actually understanding current progressions and then trying to work out how they could assist what we're doing is an area to look at as well.
Yeah.
Possibly another paper to look at.
Oh, yes.
Couple more points I've picked up is that the level of care you're going to is very fabric driven. Everything is connected to a system.
Yeah.
So if we're in there in emergency care, how does that affect healthcare? How does that affect pandemic prevention? How does that affect pediatrics? How does that affect obstetrics?
Yeah.
How does that affect general health of the community? We've got to understand that we're only one part of a system.
Yeah.
And because of that, we all have to talk and understand each other and understand relationships. We can't work in isolated pillars. Our application of care must be understanding what is the fabric and who do I need to talk to within this fabric to make sure it's a joined up response.
Yeah.
Which sounds easy, but it's probably one of the more difficult things when you get on the ground, especially when you talked about who are the decision makers in the community that you've got to buy in to get the decisions to join the fabric together.
Yeah.
So everything's sort of joined up, but it's easy to say, but probably quite complex on the ground.
Yeah. And remember, your adversaries also have a vote in the plan.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the adversary could be the stronger social group.
That's right.
Which is something to consider as well. A couple of the key points you brought out for individuals, which I think are really good, was the research is important. Before you go out, probably 9/10 of your success will be based on your preparation, looking at past lessons learned, looking at past reports, looking at the research papers, accepting it may change on the ground, but the more prepared you are, the better you've got a chance of being successful. So research is probably the unsung hero of being the successful healthcare worker.
Yeah.
And credentials and understanding of the standards of the area that you're working in is something you need to understand. Are you valid for working in the environment you're going into, and are you working to their standards? And that may change, as you say, within even one country. Individual regions may have different ways of doing
States.
it. And just to really summarize, the last point you brought out was, because you're a healthcare worker, and this has been brought out with quite a few people we've talked to when we're working more remote or in semi-permissive, is that because you're a healthcare worker, it's not a safety shield. It can probably be working against you. And understanding how society responds to the foreigner coming into their environment is going to affect that safety. And you will have to understand the risk and what risk you're comfortable with, and what are your response mechanisms should that risk become a realism of something happening on the ground. So understanding your own safety and being comfortable with the level of safety you've got is going to be an important point of your preparation. Now then, have I managed to get most of the points over? Or anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think that's brilliant, Colin. Thank you.
Good.
That's a good summary.
Good, thank you. Just one last question to ask you. I'm just a little bit cautious with our time. I know you've got a busy day. So we ask all our guests this on TSG Talk, but if you were to pick one piece of medical equipment you would always take with you no matter where you were, what do you think that might be?
Well, a few years ago, it probably would have been a guideless airway, but or a nasopharyngeal, because that's the way we were brought up. But now it's got to be a cap tourniquet.
Okay, right.
At least one, if not two, or a bag of them.
Okay, we can give you a bag. It's almost like Desert Island Discs. We've got some sway on it. We'll give you a bag of tourniquets. Actually, there's probably about 3 or 4 people now picked that as the choice. We're actually writing a guide on the last 26, 27 pods about each item everybody brought, because it's now becoming quite an amazing piece of information on the rationale behind what people take. We're producing that. No, look, David, that has been absolutely a wonderful conversation. Well, look, we could go on for another 2 hours on this.
We could,
and maybe we should follow up with another podcast. But what I'd like to just say to all of our listeners, look, thank you so much for listening to this edition of TSG Talk. We really appreciate your time. If you do like it, please press the like and subscribe. We always like our 5-star ratings. And David, I'd just like to say thank you once again for sharing your wonderful experience and sharing some of the key points you brought out that I'm sure that the listeners have found of huge benefit. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this edition of TSG Talk. We hope you found the content of benefit. Should you have any questions or require additional information, please visit tsgassociates.co.uk.